2,000 years ago, a Roman poet looked at a man with a beautiful smile and accused him of something very specific. His teeth were so white, Catullus wrote, because his mouth was full of urine. The man, Egnatius, came from Spain, and Catullus claimed that people there rubbed their teeth and gums with their own urine every morning. The whiter the teeth, the more urine he had clearly swished. It was meant as a nasty joke, but behind the joke was a real practice and a stranger question. Why did that practice actually make sense? The easy answer is that Romans were disgusting. That's the version we tell ourselves so we can feel superior. But it isn't the interesting answer. The interesting answer involves a chemical reaction, a citywide recycling system, and an emperor who understood that money has no sense of smell. The question isn't just why people would put urine in their mouths, it's what they were seeing that we forgot. Rome had aqueducts, heated baths, concrete that could set underwater, and a legal system we still study. This was not a civilization short on clever technical solutions. When Romans used urine, it wasn't because they couldn't do better. It was because, given their materials, urine was a legitimate solution to a real problem. Start with the mouth itself. Ancient teeth were not necessarily rotten. Roman diets were much lower in refined sugar than ours, so they didn't have the same epidemic of cavities. But they had stains. Wine, oil, smoke, and bread made from stone-ground grain left a constant film, and sometimes microscopic grit. White teeth were a status symbol, just as they are now. People cleaned them with powders made from pumice, ashes, bone, and crushed eggshell. Some of those abrasives probably scratched away enamel along with the stains, like cleaning a mirror with sandpaper. But somewhere in the Roman world, people noticed that aged urine did something different. It didn't just scrape the surface, it loosened the film itself. To understand why, leave the mouth and walk into a Roman fulanica, a laundry. These were not cute little shops. They were industrial cleaning operations, loud and reeking. Raw wool arrived greasy and dirty. Togas came in stained with sweat, oil, and city grime. Soap existed, but it was not the convenient supermarket product we know. The fuller solution was urine. They placed jars outside their shops and invited passers-by to contribute. Yes, a stranger could stop on the street, relieve himself into a pot, and help clean someone's toga. It was a public service. If you walked past one, you would see large stone basins and workers treading cloth. The air would sting your eyes. That sting was ammonia. It is the same sting you get from opening a bottle of strong household cleaner. And that was not an accident. Fresh urine was not the real cleaning agent, though. Urine is mostly water carrying waste products your body needs to remove. One of those waste products is urea, a small molecule that your body makes to get rid of excess nitrogen. In fact, your own liver makes urea specifically to neutralize ammonia, which would otherwise be toxic. So your body turns ammonia into urea for safe transport. Then bacteria in a jar do the reverse. They break urea down and release ammonia again. That is the chemical time bomb sitting in every pot of old urine. In a way, the Romans were fermenting it. They didn't know about bacteria, but they knew to let urine sit. Just as bread and wine needed time, urine needed time to change into something useful. The fullers weren't using fresh urine. They were waiting for it to spoil into a cleaner. When bacteria get to work on urea, they use an enzyme called urease. Urease cuts urea apart and releases ammonia. Ammonia in water is alkaline, and an alkaline solution is very good at loosening oils, proteins, and organic films. That is exactly the kind of mess that makes wool look gray. In a toga, grease and sweat don't just sit on the surface, they bind to fibers. Ammonia can break them down into forms that rinse away. A Roman fuller stomping around in a vat of aged urine was essentially using a dilute ammonia solution long before anyone knew what ammonia was. Before industrial chemistry, if you wanted an alkaline cleaning solution, you couldn't order ammonium hydroxide from a supply company. You had to find a natural source. Urine was the most concentrated, predictable, and renewable one around. It was cheap, abundant, and every city produced it continuously. That is why it became an industry. Now pull that idea back to teeth. The film on your teeth is not just dust sitting there. Right now, if you run your tongue over your front teeth, you'll probably feel a slight fuzz. That is the beginning of the exact film. It's organic material, food residue, wine pigments, proteins, and bacterial slime. If an alkaline solution can break down the organic gunk in wool, it can do something similar to the film on a tooth. The result looks like whiter teeth, not because the urine bleached the enamel, but because it removed the dull layer sitting on top. To a Roman, this was not molecular biology. It was practical pattern recognition. Old urine makes dirty things look cleaner. Wool, yes. Teeth, maybe. If the pot is already by the door, trying it on your mouth is not an enormous leap. Urine was probably not used as a breath freshener. This was not a minty rinse. It was a whitening treatment. The smell would have been unpleasant. But if you rinsed your mouth afterward with water or herbs, you got the visual result without carrying the smell all day. Roman beauty culture cared about the mouth, but it separated different problems. One substance might whiten, another might freshen. Urine was for whitening. That pattern made urine valuable. Public toilets, apartment blocks, and street corners became collection points. Fullers and tanners bought it. Urine was so reliably in demand that the Emperor Vespasian put a tax on it. His son Titus thought taxing urine was beneath the dignity of Rome. Vespasian supposedly held a coin up and asked whether it smelled. Titus said no. Vespasian replied, "Pecunia non olet." Money doesn't stink. That story is almost too perfect. The Romans didn't romanticize urine, they monetized it. And the tax only makes sense if people were willing to pay for the stuff. They were, because it worked. Now, a fair question. Did Romans actually brush their teeth with urine, or are we repeating a satirical insult? The truth is, we don't have a Roman toothpaste advertisement saying, "now with added urine." What we have is Catullus. He didn't say all Romans did it, he said a man from Spain did, or at least that people in his region did. That tells us something important. Catullus expected his readers to understand the insult. Urine whitening teeth wasn't presented as exotic nonsense. It was presented as common knowledge, disgusting but comprehensible. Other Roman sources describe urine used for cleaning cloth. So the safest reading is this. Romans definitely used urine as an industrial cleaning product. They knew it whitened fabric. Some people, especially outside the capital, likely used the same logic on their teeth. It may not have been universal, but it was real enough to become the target of a poem. Catullus's poem is also a piece of cultural snobbery. He locates the tooth whitening habit in Spain, not Rome. That may mean Romans considered it a provincial custom, or it may just be a convenient insult. But Rome was already using urine for laundry, so the chemical logic was already in the city. What disgusted the poet wasn't the use of urine itself, it was putting it in your mouth. That's a very human line between industrial tool and personal hygiene. Let's get precise about the molecule, because this is where the story becomes less gross and more interesting. Urea is small, stable, and very common in biology. By itself, it doesn't smell like much. But when bacteria break it down, they use an enzyme called urease. Urease cuts urea apart and releases ammonia. That ammonia is the sharp, stinging smell in old urine. It's also the smell in some household cleaners. That's not a coincidence. Cleaning products that contain ammonia smell like old urine because they share the same active molecule. The smell isn't just a side effect, it's the cleaning agent itself. This is the hidden joke in the Roman practice. When we wrinkle our noses at old urine, we're reacting to ammonia. But ammonia is also the reason it worked. The smell and the cleaning power are the same molecule. A modern bottle of ammonia cleaner and a Roman laundry pot smell similar for the same chemical reason. The difference is that one comes from a factory and the other from a public toilet. Chemically, your nose does not care. So, did it actually whiten teeth? In a superficial way, yes. An alkaline solution would have loosened some of the organic film on the teeth, making them look brighter. It might also have changed the bacterial environment in the mouth, since many microbes prefer a neutral or acidic setting. But worked does not mean safe. Urine is not a refined dental product. It's a dilute chemical cleaner that contains plenty of other things. The ammonia could irritate gums and soft tissue. The collected urine was not sterile, and it would not have protected against cavities the way fluoride does. It was probably a genuinely effective stain remover. It just wasn't a good long-term health strategy. Modern whitening strips go further. They use peroxide to penetrate enamel and oxidize deep stains. Urine didn't do that. It was more like cleaning a dirty window than replacing the glass. The active idea never fully disappeared. Modern chemists still use urea in some products, though they control the concentration and the other ingredients. The principle is the same. A small molecule breaks down into something more reactive. The Romans found a natural version of that process and used it without understanding the mechanism. If you're tempted to test the Roman method, don't. Modern dentistry has more pleasant ways to achieve the same goal. But the fact that the method worked at all is the point. The harder question isn't chemical, it's psychological. Why does this make us cringe? Because urine belongs to a category called waste. Once something is categorized as waste, we treat it as permanently dirty, regardless of what is actually in it. But categories shift across time and culture. Romans had discussed responses too. They weren't completely alien, but they didn't put aged urine in the same untouchable category we do. They put it next to lye, chalk, and other industrial tools. If urine is a cleaning chemical, using it on teeth is unpleasant, but not insane. If urine is sewage, using it on teeth is unthinkable. The Roman category was different. That's why they could collect it, sell it, and tax it. There is biology in disgust too. Bodily fluids trigger alarm because they can carry disease. But the feeling is not a chemical analysis. It uses category labels. That's why a bottle of synthetic ammonia doesn't make you gag the same way a pot of aged urine does, even though high concentration ammonia can be dangerous. The brain cares about origin, not molecular risk. The Romans had a different origin story for urine. To them, it was a raw material. Catullus understood the disgust. That was his joke. But the joke cuts both ways. The man he mocked may have had whiter teeth than Catullus. The poet was making a social point. No matter how nice your smile is, we all know what you used. But if you set the disgust aside, Egnatius was doing something very Roman. He had observed a material, figured out what it could do, and used it. He just happened to use a resource that modern people prefer to flush and forget. At the center of this whole story is one small molecule, ammonia. It doesn't ask where the urea came from. It doesn't care about human embarrassment. It just breaks down proteins and oils, which makes dirty wool cleaner and stained teeth look whiter. The Romans didn't know about ammonia, but they knew about results. They were so confident in those results that they collected urine, sold it, taxed it, and joked about it. So why did the Romans brush their teeth with urine? Because it worked. And the thing that made it work is the same thing that makes old urine smell sharp. The cleaning power and the smell are the same molecule. The Romans may not have been able to name it, but they didn't need to. They just needed a jar, a few days, and a total disregard for what the neighbors thought.